you mentioned the kind of overall percentages that will be automatic into pensions. People might hear those figures. 8% is automatic. It actually, all the advice is that it needs to be some way above that. And particularly that's the case if you've sort of delayed your pension savings. It might need to be up near sort of 15, 20% of your salary going into a pension. That will horrify people to hear that. And they'll think, well, how on earth am I going to get another 10% from my salary into a pension? And the answer to that is you do it gradually. You do it gradually and you up it over several years to get to those kind of target figures. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Personal Investor Podcast. I'm Ed Monk, and I'm joined today by Fidelity's Jemma Slingo. We are in a brand new tax year, so we're going to be giving you today an essential checklist to get your saving and investing on track for the financial year ahead. Before that, let me remind you that if you find this video useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and leave a comment if you want to do that. And once you've subscribed, remember to hit that bell icon at the top of the page to turn on notifications and to make sure that you get new content as soon as it is released. That said, Jemma, welcome along and happy new tax year, I guess.
Yeah, happy new tax year.
Thank you very much. What we're trying to do today, Jemma, I guess, is to capture the most essential tips and hacks and checks that people can carry out to keep their finances on track for the financial year ahead. We're going to give you the top 5 tax tips tips for the new tax year. I'd like to start, if we can, with what is really the bedrock of everyone's finances, really, and that is cash savings. What is it important for people to bear in mind when it comes to cash at the start of a new tax year?
Yeah, so cash is often what people think about when they start doing their financial MOT. And that makes a lot of sense, really, because you need to have a cushion of cash there to dip into if life goes a bit awry, if suddenly you get a big bill, so it's there to support you when you need it. It's commonly said that you need between about 3 and 6 months worth of essential spending in cash. So that's to cover things like your rent or your mortgage payments, your food, your transport, things you can't scrimp on. And when you're thinking about where to keep that cash, you want it in a place that you can access immediately and which won't charge you to get it out. So you're thinking about things like a normal savings account or like an easy access cash ISA. So you can access that money as and when you need it and for when life takes a bit of an unexpected turn.
Yeah, and get the best return on that money that you can, because in the fullness of time, it might not be all of your wealth sort of thing, but you do want it to be earning the best interest. And there are places you can look online to kind of compare cash accounts. But as you say, it's that ability to access that money that's really important as well. And we should just have a quick word here on there may be people with no cash savings or even debts before that. And clearly those are something to look at before maybe you start building up lots of cash savings.
Yeah, so if you have, for example, credit card debts or something, it's really important to have a plan of how you're going to pay that back, because that's sort of the first step in building that financial resilience that you need. I think, as you say, you're not wanting to make a massively juicy return on your emergency savings bucket, but you do want to shop around and see where you can get the best rates. And I think it is really easy to be, to let inertia set in and just think, I'll just leave it in that account because it's been there for ages. And I'm definitely guilty of that myself. But you can sort of look online, see what's offering the best interest rate and, go for that.
Yeah, and actually something that I do with my cash savings is to have some money in a cash savings account that's actually basically with the bank that I have a current account with. It makes things easier if you just need to do a little bit of transferring around. But I try not to keep too much in there. Then there's a bigger bulk in somewhere where there's a kind of more genuine sort of interest rate. Okay, so job number 2 is checking your pension, Jemma, and the progress that you're making towards your sort of long-term retirement savings goals. The first thing I guess is get some visibility around that and go from there.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is just figuring out what pensions you actually have. Because if you've had a long career, you've moved jobs a few times, it's actually really easy to lose track of the pensions you actually have. Then the next step is logging in. And that sounds really
Yeah.
silly, but like if you have a really old pension and you have no idea what the password is, it is quite easy to be like, I'm just going to put that aside for later. But actually, I've done this myself recently because I was consolidating a couple of pensions, and actually the process was much easier than I was expecting it to be. So once you've logged in, you have better visibility of what money you actually have.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you can sort of think about your retirement and think, well, how much money might I need for my retirement?
Not a straightforward question.
No, it's not. And you sort of want to map it onto the numbers that you're seeing in your pension accounts. So as you say, it's actually really quite tricky, because if you're just looking at a number sitting in an account, it's quite hard to know what sort of income that might generate and actually how much money you might need in your retirement.
Yeah.
But there are loads of different tools out there to help you get started on that. So Fidelity, for example, has a retirement calculator, which basically lets you do like a little short anonymous quiz. It will project your income in retirement, and then it will say, will that fund the sort of lifestyle that you like?
Yeah.
So there are various different tools out there to help you get started in that planning journey.
Yeah, and a few things to say here. I mean, for people who genuinely haven't sort of engaged with any of their pension saving before, but they think that they have some pension savings, maybe with previous jobs or what have you, the first thing to do is kind of get into those accounts, as you say, and get some visibility. It's easier than it once was. I would say that it used to be a real problem. You'd have to sort of email old HR departments that you're not really a priority for them. It was very difficult. It's easier now. Login is easier. And you should be able to sort of see, as you say, a cash figure. There is a conversation to be had about whether you want to consolidate those old pensions and bring them together. But for now, just seeing how much you've got is the main thing. And like you say, after that, there's loads of online kind of calculators that you can use and guidance that you can read around what money in a pension kind of translates to in terms of income, and therefore the progress you're making towards a financial goal. Which brings me on to job number 3, which is to, once you've done that with your pension savings, sort of work out whether you need to make up any ground. And importantly, not to panic if you do, because most people actually often feel like that. But then once you've found that information out, you can think about maybe upping your contributions, right?
Yeah, so I thought a bit of background might be useful here for workplace pensions. So for most people, you have to be contributing 8% of your qualifying earnings into your pension. And that's made up of 3% from your employer, 5% from you, including tax relief. So that's sort of the starting point, I suppose.
Yeah.
But a lot of employers are actually more generous than that. So there's often a situation where if you increase your contributions, your employer will also increase them. So matching is often quite a common way of doing this. So for example, if I put in 6%, maybe my employer would put in 6% as well. So it makes sense to dial up your contributions a bit, because that means your employer is having to contribute more.
And that's just a free benefit from your employer that you should that you won't get unless you make that extra contribution on top.
Exactly. So when you're thinking about how much you want to be putting into your pension each month, you're wanting to really max out your employer contributions and not leave money on the table, basically. Yeah. There's also a conversation to be had around pay rises. So if you've had a nice pay rise, you're probably thinking, oh, great, like I'm going to have way more take-home pay every month. But you might want to think about putting a bit of that into your pension, sort of saving for your future self.
Yeah.
And I guess it's tricky because when you're young, it's really tempting just to ignore your pension because you're thinking, well, I need that money now. Like I might want to buy a house, or I just need to get through the month, whatever it may be. And you're always sort of having to weigh up your future self with your current self. But it's often overlooked how big an impact quite small contributions early on can have on your pension further down the line. So I was looking at Fidelity has a really cool calculator called like the Power of Small Amounts calculator.
Yes.
And it basically lets you put in your age and shows how much like a tiny extra contribution each month would play out down the line and how much you'd end up with when you're, I think it's 68. So I don't think you want to ignore your pension just because you're quite a long way away from retirement.
Absolutely. I mean, the point you make there about sort of your pay rises that come, you might sat here in April, you might be thinking, well, the pay round is at the end of the year, what have you. I might get a 3% or a 4% pay rise. Maybe you get a promotion. It's even more. And the point is, when you earn more, because your pension contribution is typically worked out as a percentage of your pay, that pay rise will translate into more going into your pension. But what we're saying is actually up the percentage that goes in. So if you get a 4% pay rise, keep 3% of that for you so that you actually feel a bit richer every month. That's important. But then an extra 1% of your salary goes in. You mentioned the kind of overall percentages that will be automatic into pensions. People might hear those figures. 8% is automatic. It actually, all the advice is that it needs to be some way above that. And particularly that's the case if you've sort of delayed your pension savings. It might need to be up near sort of 15, 20% of your salary going into a pension. That will horrify people to hear that. And they'll think, well, how on earth am I going to get another 10% from my salary into a pension? And the answer to that is you do it gradually. You do it gradually and you up it over several years to get to those kind of target figures.
I think so. Or you could have a very fixed strategy of thinking, well, for example, 2 years, this is how much I'm going to put in. And it might feel like a stretch, but in that time period, you'll really sort of boost those retirement savings and have a big impact in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah.
But it's personal to everyone, isn't it, really? But I think just ignoring the situation is not the thing to do if you're thinking, actually, I'm not saving enough every month.
Yeah. Okay. Well, job number 4, Gemma, is sorting out your investing and your saving outside of pensions. Pensions obviously there for retirement specifically, but people are likely and ideally will have savings and investments potentially outside of that as well. That normally means ISAs. Whether that's money for a specific person or whether it's going towards retirement. So what is there to say there?
Yeah, so we've talked about cash and we've talked about debt. So once you've got those things sorted, once you've paid off your debt, you've got that emergency cash bucket, you can start thinking about investing in an ISA, as you say. And that's a really good way to grow your money because you don't have to pay any tax on the returns that you make if it's in that ISA wrapper. One really nice way to invest in an ISA is through a regular savings plan, which basically means you just set aside a certain amount of money every month and it goes automatically out of your account into your ISA. So you don't need to consciously think about it. And that takes a lot of the emotion out of investing, which is quite important, I'd say, because if you think about the market backdrop today, it feels quite unsettled. People will be feeling a bit nervous. But if you have this regular thing going into your ISA, you're not having to time the market. You're not having to sort of fret about exactly what the stock market is doing at certain points of time. And history suggests that's actually a really sensible way to invest because it sort of averages out the price you're paying for your investments over longer periods. I think it's important to say you don't need loads and loads of money to be doing this. So you might only have to put aside £25 a month, say, into regular savings plan. But every little helps makes a difference.
And it's like a lot of things. If you automate it, you can just kind of not worry about it, and it's just sort of you're more likely to do it. I mean, the big mistake I think a lot of people make is that I'm just going to wait until I've got the money, or I'm like, they'll want to do it, but they won't sort of. They'll just sort of vaguely put it off. Actually automating it in those small amounts every single month just means that you're going to do it. And as you say, there are actually good sort of investment sort of psychology reasons why you should do it. You're going to be if markets fall, you're going to be buying assets at a lower price. It's done automatically. You're going to get the benefit of that. It's just a great thing to do. We should also mention here the things you're actually investing in. There's 101 ways to actually make that decision, but it's about checking that what you have or what you're going to have is broadly speaking right for you. There are ways to do it even if you don't have loads of knowledge.
I think so. I mean, you have to think about what your goals are, how old you are, what your time horizons are, and that will all feed into decisions around how much risk you want to take and whether you're going for something that has loads of growth potential or whether you want a steadier income or something that doesn't jump around too much. All those are the sorts of things you have to think about when you're actually picking the specific investments in your ISA.
And just finally, before we move on from this point, if people do want to invest like this, and it's outside of a pension, so they could potentially get the money, it's very important to have their mindset right, isn't it? To ensure that they understand this money is for the long term. It will fall from time to time in value, and the important thing is not to panic in those situations. That's kind of the worst thing you can do.
I think so. So rule of thumb is that you have to be looking about 5 years in the future. So you don't want to put it in and then start having a meltdown because you think, oh no, like things have fallen. I wasn't expecting this. This isn't what I was told. You have to be thinking long term. And if you have a particular goal in mind, for example, it's 2 years down the line, investing in the stock market might not be the right thing for that particular goal because there might be too much volatility.
Okay, cool. Finally then, one last really important job that people often forget to do because it's kind of a difficult and unpleasant thing to think about potentially, and that is what happens if you're no longer around and your money has to be paid to your loved ones in the event of your death. Never a pleasant thing to think about, but there are some straightforward ways that you can address this, aren't there?
There are. So the first thing is to make a will. Again, a really easy thing to put off because it's not very nice to think about. But that basically will determine what happens to your property, your possessions, your house, sometimes even your children in the event of your death. And it just makes sure that your wishes will be, in the right hands and set out clearly. So that's particularly important if you have children or if you're in a relationship but you're not married. So often if you're not married, your partner could easily receive very little if you die without a will. So it's important just to set that out very clearly and get that done. And once you've done it, unless your life circumstances change, you probably won't need to revisit it very often. The next thing to think about is your pension, because your pension doesn't actually fall within sort of the scope of your will. You have to set out something separate when you're explaining what you want to happen to your pension. So it's often called an expression of wish form. So it's a really easy form to fill in. Basically, you just have to nominate who you would like to receive your pension in the event of your death. So that's another thing to tick off. And the third thing, I suppose, is a little bit more complicated, but it's around insurance, so life insurance. So if you're buying, for example, a property with someone, you take on a mortgage, it can be a good idea to take out life insurance because it might avoid a situation where if one of you dies, the other one has to sell the property because they can't cover the mortgage anymore. And there are various types of insurance and ways of sort of arranging your affairs, but that's something to think about.
And like a lot, well, these jobs actually, they're not like you have to do them every single year. So a lot of people would have sorted this out and it won't be an issue. But if you haven't, it's a really good nudge to do it at this time of year. And just to ensure if you have done it, that it's all sort of still makes sense. It's all according to your wishes. We've sort of covered before sort of horrible instances where people find that a loved one dies, but they haven't altered their will, and still money is going to ex-partners or places they don't want it to go to. So it is important to get on top of all of that. Okay, Jemma, that is just about all the time we have, and we've covered off those 5 essential tips, so we're going to leave it there for now. I will just remind you all that if you found this useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon to get notified as soon as new content is released. Give us a like or share the episodes. It really does help other people find what we're doing here. That all said, Jemma, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.